I still remember the day I got the text. "Hey, I've got my family's cabin for the weekend. Want to come?" No signal up there, but the views are worth it. I stared at my phone for a good 5 minutes before responding. We'd only been dating for 3 months. Was a secluded cabin getaway too much too soon? But something about disconnecting from the world and spending uninterrupted time together felt right. So I typed back, "Sounds perfect. I'm in." Little did I know what I was signing up for. The cabin was more remote than I had imagined, nestled deep in the pine forests about 3 hours from the city. As we drove further into the wilderness, I watched the bars on my phone gradually disappear until the screen displayed those dreaded words, "No service." I felt that familiar twinge of anxiety, the digital umbilical cord being severed. What if there was an emergency? What if work needed me? What if? He must have sensed my unease because he reached over and squeezed my hand. "Trust me," he said. "By tomorrow, you won't even miss it." The road narrowed as we climbed higher into the mountains. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as we wound through dense forest, the afternoon sun filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns. I rolled down the window, breathing in the sharp scent of pine and earth. It had been years since I'd been somewhere this quiet, this untouched. The city's constant hum, traffic, sirens, construction, the white noise of civilization, had become so normal that its absence felt almost unsettling. When we finally rounded the last bend, the cabin came into view. It wasn't what I'd expected. In my mind, I'd pictured something rustic but spacious, one of those Instagram-worthy retreats with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist Scandinavian furniture. What stood before us was decidedly more authentic. A modest A-frame structure with weathered cedar siding, a small porch strung with faded prayer flags, and a woodpile stacked neatly against one wall. It wasn't fancy, but it had character, the kind you can't manufacture or design. "Home sweet home," he said, cutting the engine. "At least for the next 48 hours. He grabbed our bags from the trunk while I stood taking it all in, the cabin, the towering pines, the sliver of lake visible through the trees. The silence was profound, broken only by birdsong and the whisper of wind through branches. I felt something inside me begin to unwind, a tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. He produced a single key from his pocket, old and brass, the kind you don't see much anymore in our world of electronic locks and key fobs. "There's only one," he explained, "family tradition. Whoever has the key is responsible for the cabin." He handed it to me with a small smile. "Would you like to do the honors?" The door creaked open to reveal a space that was small but cozy. The main room served as both living area and kitchen, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A narrow staircase led to what I assumed was a loft bedroom. Everything about the place spoke of years of family memories. The well-worn furniture, the faded photographs on the walls, the collection of board games stacked in a corner. It wasn't fancy, but it felt lived in and loved. "The electricity is limited," he explained, flicking on a lamp that cast a warm glow across the room. "Solar panels provide enough for basic lighting and the refrigerator, but no TV, no microwave." He gestured toward an antique-looking stove. "We cook the old-fashioned way here." As I explored the small space, I noticed the kettle on the stove, a beautiful copper thing, burnished with age and use. "That kettle has been here longer than I've been alive," he said, following my gaze. "My grandfather bought it on a trip to Ireland in the 60s. Every morning starts with that kettle and ends with it too. Tea or hot chocolate before bed, another family tradition." There was something intimate about the thought of sharing this kettle, this ritual. In the city, we lived in separate apartments with our own routines, our own appliances, our own lives that intersected but remained distinct. Here, we would share everything, the small space, the daily rhythms, the single key that symbolized joint responsibility. We unpacked our groceries and settled in as afternoon faded toward evening. I watched him move around the cabin with the ease of familiarity, knowing exactly which cupboard held the plates, which drawer contained the matches for the fireplace. This place was part of his history, and he was inviting me into it. The significance wasn't lost on me. As the sun began to set, we took our drinks onto the porch and watched the sky transform, brilliant orange giving way to pink, then deepening to purple before the first stars appeared. Without city lights to compete with, the night sky revealed itself in all its glory. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen so many stars. "So what's the plan for tomorrow?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "That depends," he replied. "We could hike to the lake. It's about an hour each way. Or there's a waterfall about 2 miles in the other direction. Or," he paused, taking a sip of his drink, "we could do absolutely nothing. That's the beauty of this place. There's no schedule, no obligations, no distractions." The thought was both liberating and slightly terrifying. In my regular life, every hour was accounted for: work meetings, deadlines, social commitments, exercise classes, the constant ping of notifications demanding attention. What would it be like to have a day with nothing planned, nothing required? As darkness settled around us, we moved inside. He built a fire while I prepared a simple dinner: pasta with vegetables and the wine we'd brought from the city. We ate by firelight, talking more deeply than we ever had before. Without phones to check or shows to watch, conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic. We shared childhood memories, professional frustrations, dreams for the future. I learned more about him in those few hours than I had in the previous 3 months. When it was time for bed, he filled the copper kettle and set it on the stove for our nighttime tea. There was something soothing about the ritual: the gentle whistle as steam escaped, the earthy aroma of the herbal blend he'd brought, the warmth of the mug between my hands. We took our tea to the loft, where a comfortable bed was made up with thick quilts against the night chill. Through the skylight above the bed, stars were visible, countless pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. It was the last thing I saw before falling into the deepest sleep I'd had in months, lulled by the absolute quiet and the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me. Morning came with golden light filtering through the windows and the distant call of birds. For a moment, I felt disoriented, reaching automatically for my phone before remembering where I was. No alarm had jolted me awake. No notifications awaited my attention. I had simply slept until my body decided it was time to wake. He was already up, and I could hear the familiar sound of the kettle beginning to whistle downstairs. I wrapped myself in one of the quilts and patted down to join him. He stood at the stove in pajama pants and a faded t-shirt, hair tousled from sleep, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him in the city. "Morning," he smiled, pouring hot water over coffee grounds in a French press. "Sleep well?" I nodded, accepting the mug he offered. "Better than I have in ages. It's so quiet here." We took our coffee outside, where morning mist still clung to the trees and dew sparkled on every surface. A deer and her fawn appeared briefly at the edge of the clearing before disappearing back into the forest. It felt like a gift, this glimpse of life continuing undisturbed by human presence. After a breakfast of eggs and toast, we set out for the lake he'd mentioned. The trail was narrow but well-maintained, winding through stands of pine and aspen. The physical exertion felt good after months of desk work and gym sessions. This was different, not exercise for the sake of exercise, but movement with purpose, with destination. The conversation flowed easily as we walked, punctuated by comfortable silences when the trail steepened or when one of us stopped to examine an interesting plant or rock formation. Without the constant interruption of notifications, our attention remained present, focused on each other and our surroundings. The lake, when we reached it, was worth every step of the journey. Perfectly still, it mirrored the surrounding mountains and sky like polished glass. We found a sunny rock outcropping and spread out the simple lunch we'd packed: sandwiches, apples, and cookies he'd baked before the trip. "My parents got engaged here," he said suddenly, gesturing toward the lake. "Right on that little peninsula. Dad says he was so nervous, he almost dropped the ring in the water." I looked at him, wondering if this revelation had deeper meaning, but his expression was relaxed, nostalgic rather than nervous. He was simply sharing another piece of his history, another connection to this place. We spent hours by the lake, swimming in the cold, clear water, then drying in the sun, talking about everything and nothing. Without the artificial time constraints of normal life, moments expanded. There was no need to check the time, no next appointment to hurry toward. The hike back seemed shorter somehow, and we returned to the cabin pleasantly tired, hungry, and more at ease with each other than ever before. As the sun began its descent, we worked together to prepare dinner, a more ambitious meal than the previous night, involving the old cast-iron skillet and vegetables we'd brought from the farmer's market. The simple act of cooking together, chopping, stirring, tasting, created a domestic intimacy we hadn't experienced before. In the city, we usually ate at restaurants or ordered takeout, our busy schedules rarely aligning for home-cooked meals. Here, the preparation was as important as the eating, the process as valuable as the result. After dinner, with the copper kettle once again providing our evening tea, we brought the old chess set down from a shelf and played by the light of the fire. Neither of us was particularly skilled, but that wasn't the point. The game provided structure for more conversation, more laughter, more connection. As night deepened around the cabin, he refilled our mugs one last time and said, "Want to see something amazing?" Taking the single key from its hook by the door, he led me outside and a short distance into the trees, where a small clearing offered an unobstructed view of the night sky. What I saw took my breath away. The Milky Way stretched across the darkness, a river of stars, more brilliant and clear than I had ever seen it. We stood in silence, heads tilted back, absorbing the vastness above us. "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" he said softly. But not in a bad way. More like part of something bigger. I understood exactly what he meant. In the city, surrounded by human achievement, towering buildings, bustling commerce, constant innovation, it was easy to forget our place in the larger scheme of things. Here, under the ancient stars, perspective shifted. We returned to the cabin hand in hand, the single key a weight in his pocket that somehow represented more than just access to a building. It was trust, responsibility, the choice to lock out the world and create a space that was just ours, if only temporarily. Our final day dawned clear and crisp. By unspoken agreement, we moved more slowly, savoring each moment before our return to civilization. The morning ritual with the copper kettle, now familiar and comforting. A lazy breakfast that stretched into mid-morning. One last walk through the surrounding forest, collecting pine cones and interesting stones as mementos. As the time to leave approached, I felt a curious mixture of emotions. Part of me longed for a hot shower, my own bed, the conveniences of modern life. But another part, a part that had grown stronger over the weekend, was reluctant to leave this simpler existence, this deeper connection we'd found. We cleaned the cabin together, returning everything to its proper place. He showed me the guest book, where visitors had recorded their stays for generations. I added our names and dates, along with a brief note of thanks, feeling honored to become part of the cabin's ongoing story. The final act before departure was boiling the kettle one last time, washing it carefully, and placing it back in its spot on the stove, ready for the next visitors. He ran his hand over the copper surface almost reverently. "Until next time," he murmured. As we locked the door, that single key turning in the old lock, I realized how much had changed in just 48 hours. We had arrived as a couple still learning each other's contours, still careful, still somewhat separate despite our growing feelings. We were leaving as something more integrated, more honest, more real. The drive back towards civilization was quiet, contemplative. With each mile, bars of service began to reappear on our phones, which we'd left turned off by mutual agreement. The pings of incoming messages started, reality reasserting itself, demanding attention. But something had shifted. The digital tether felt less essential, less urgent. We had discovered that we could exist, happily, meaningfully, without constant connection to the outside world. More importantly, we had deepened our connection to each other in ways that might not have been possible with the usual distractions. As the city skyline appeared on the horizon, he reached over and took my hand. "So," he said, "same time next month?" I smiled, thinking of the copper kettle waiting on the stove, the single key that we now shared responsibility for, the cabin that had become part of our story together. "Absolutely," I replied. "I wouldn't miss it." What I learned that weekend has stayed with me long after our return to normal life. The importance of unplugging, of creating space for genuine connection. The value of shared rituals, however simple. The power of trusting someone enough to be truly present, without distractions or escape routes. And sometimes, when city life becomes too overwhelming, I close my eyes and imagine that cabin, the weathered cedar siding, the prayer flags fluttering on the porch, the copper kettle waiting patiently on the stove. In my mind, I can still hear the perfect silence of the forest, still see the stars through the skylight, still feel the weight of that single brass key in my hand. And I remember that somewhere, Beyond the noise and hurry of everyday existence, that quiet space still exists, a reminder of what really matters, waiting for whenever we need to return. Total _count, 13,782.